Has anyone ever honored one of those if we're still single at 40 let's get married commitments? How did it go? Friends since we were 14 in high school. Made a pact in our early 20s about if we were 30, childless, unhappy, etc. Got married at 30. 7 years later it's still the best relationship we've ever had and going strong. We ended up getting married at 30 instead. As it turns out we loved each other and made every excuse to ignore it. I did that. I met her in high school. We grew apart over the years. We reconnected and said let's get married if we're both single when we're 40. Then we said duck it. Let's go to Vegas and get married by Elvis. Our first kiss was Thanksgiving Day and we were married on the 17th of December. We're still going strong after 7 years. Longest relationship I've been in. Best decision of my life. Weird couple my wife knew had such a pact and followed through. Girl was a really introverted, quiet, homely type. Sweetest girl. But she never had a boyfriend as far as I knew. And we saw her off and on for 6 or 7 years. Then suddenly out of nowhere she invited us to her wedding. Anyways, it was to a guy we had met a couple of times who was one of her friends who seemed very much like her. My wife teased her that more must have been going on all that time. But she was straight up about it. And said no. They just decided it was time. Conversation was something like, yeah, you know how people have pacts to get married if neither of them are till they hit. Well, we just decided it really wasn't going to happen for either of us. And to cut that short, basically we were just like, cool, and then left it at that. Anyways, she married him. They looked happy. The speeches were a bit odd. They didn't really talk about love but a lot about how they were marrying their best friend. They are still together. It's gotta be at least 5 years. And they have a little kid. Last we saw them they looked happy and that's all that matters really. I've got a roller coaster of a story. So when I was a kid we got a new neighbor. He was great. Had a cute dog. Seemed to have his life together. But was chronically single despite his best efforts. Few months later we hear he got married. Much to everyone's surprise. Because he clearly hadn't been seeing anyone prior. Turns out he had made a pact to marry his best female friend when they both turned 30. If they weren't in a relationship. And they followed through. She was the world's sweetest person. And really pretty to boot. Frankly, everyone was surprised that either of them felt this was necessary to begin with. She'd moved across the country to be with him. So she didn't have any family nearby and that's probably partly how we all became so close. Anyhow, they were actually crazy happy together. Got another dog. etc. The only thing that seemed off was that despite several years of him and her talking about desperately wanting kids, she was pretty well always interacting with me. They were still childless, which everyone assumed was owing to a medical issue. Then we learned that, while an absolutely fantastic and loving husband when sober, he made for a mean drunk. This culminated in her snapping and pulling a knife on him, and leaving. They were separated for a few years, during which time neither wanted to explore divorce other relationships, because they still loved each other, and her leaving was definitely the boot he needed to get his rear in gear. He spent those years with Alanon, became incredibly involved in his church and community, and spent a lot of effort winning her back, convincing her he changed. They're now together and seemingly happy as ever. We only know all of this because he was super open about his problems with his community, doing some advocacy stuff. He had one brief fall off the wagon, but checked into rehab, or something like it, almost immediately, and has since been doing well. They've both decided not to have kids, because they are not sure he could handle the stress and the temptation to start drinking again. They've recently moved to an acreage in a very remote area, so we don't hear from them as often. But last I heard they were doing really well. Edit. AA not Alanon. Till there is a difference. Edit. Holy cow. My first gold. Thank you. Whoever you are. I made the pact with my best friend when we were 15 that if we were single by 30 we'd get married. We're 29 and still talk to each other daily. We're also both single. She also remembers the pact. Sweats. Edit 1. Lem see what she thinks about that pact. We'll let you know. Edit 2. We're talking. Edit 3. Part 1. Part 2. Holy it. Edit 4. OMG thanks for the plat. I know a couple at my church who were friends first, like best friends, and when they got in their 30s they still weren't engaged or married to anyone, so they decided to get married. They're still together and very much in love. Had one to get married at 30. I got married before that and I don't think my friend took it well. We had sort of a strained relationship after and now we don't really talk much. Used to be best friends. It wasn't for marriage, but in high school, I had a deal with my wife that if she was single at the time she'd go to prom with me. We ended up dating a few months after that, and have been together for 12 years now. I had this one friend I would hook up with on and off for years, and we had this pact: if she hit 30 we would marry. I would be 35. I always avoided actually dating her because she cheated on every boyfriend she was ever with and was a bit of a nomad. I told her I didn't want to ruin the friendship. When I got engaged to my wife, my FWB was livid. She figured she can have all the fun and we'd get married at some point. I never spoke to her again after my engagement. She got married last year. I congratulated her but got no response. I did. I dated my first girlfriend when we were about 17-19. Then she broke up with me, but we had said such a thing before while we were still dating. We both had a few boy girlfriends over the years. But about 15 years later we met again and essentially said I really didn't find anyone with whom I felt like I did with you. But it wasn't with resignation. More of an epiphany. So we started dating again. And married soon after. And couldn't be happier. Had one for 30 and moving in together. She was 7 years my senior and around that time we were both in a transient part of our lives. So I asked. She said no and moved across the country. I think, if memory serves, my wife and I had one of those. But we ended up together and married in our early 20s. A friend and I made a pact in college that we would marry each other if we're both single by the time I'm 30. I'm turning 30 in a few years. We barely spoke for the last 7 years. He now has a girlfriend and lives in another country. I don't think it's going to happen. My friend tried this as a proposal on his longtime friend and it worked so beautifully that I wanna try that out once. This is what basically happened. He asked the girl if she would like to be in a relationship with him if both of them were single after a certain age. The girl replied that it would be better than being single, so yeah. Then she asked at what age should we start dating each other. And then with a few seconds of the pretending to think expression, the boy said, well, how about 17? Their age at that time. Edit. You swore B8D asked if this was a copy paste. Yes. This was copy paste of my very first comment on Reddit. I use it many times. Even in gatherings. When someone tells me to say something. Nothing. Lol, my friend gave me conversation material. Oh god no. Mine was with my best friend's mother. She actually made a point of reminding me a few years ago. We didn't do this exactly, but when we were 19 we joked that we should get married if we're both 35 and single. 2 years later, I came home for a week from college. We hung out in our normal friend group, and she and I hooked up for the first time. We ended up starting a relationship, got married when we were 27, and are still together at 30. Not a result of the pact obviously, but funny that we ended up married anyways. I told my boyfriend that I will marry him when I retire. Now I have to work for the rest of my life. I had one of these with my best female friend from high school, but it was 30 not 40. Meanwhile I've gotten married twice before 30 and she would have been my best. Whoa, man at both weddings, but she was in OCS the first time, deployed the second time. Doesn't seem meant to be, does it? All that said, if something weird happened and I was single and she remembered the pact, I'd absolutely hold up my side. I had several pacts like this over the years. Within a year, they were all in serious relationships. I was like the wedding bargain matchmaker. All good though. Been with a great woman for almost 4 years now. And we were good friends for 7 years before that. I have one. It makes me kinda sad. I'm married with 3 kids and she's still single. She turns 40 this coming February. Edit. To clarify for the slow. I am sad because I feel bad for her that she will still be single and I pray she wasn't hoping I would be too. I'm not leaving my wife at all. Boggles the mind that I would have to say that. I had one with my best friend in high school. We're both gay, lesbian and a gay man, and knew we'd want to adopt kids. Flash forward 4 years and I go to visit him. His roommate is gorgeous, funny, and incredibly kind. Turns out she was also moving across the country in a month. But we couldn't stop talking and ended up together. Long story short, I didn't end up marrying him, but I am going to marry his former roommate. I had one with a friend a while back, but at age 27, she was murdered 2 years ago. I turned 27 in January. Still hurts me heart, but I have an incredible woman now, but my memory of her is so great. Not me and doesn't really answer the question, but my current GF had one of these pacts with a guy she knew. It was a joke in their friend group cause till me. Neither had dated. I don't think either took it seriously. I will answer after 10 years if I get someone to have such pact. My friend and I had something like that in high school, but it was 30 and we ended up dating until we turned 30 and got married. My BFF guy friend got married at 28. She is lovely and they are so happy. I'm actually wearing the Wonder Woman shirt they gave me for the wedding photos right now. I was a groomswoman. Through our 20s we kept putting the date later. 30, then 35, then 40 etc. I tell ya though, if she passes away in some freak accident and he decided to revert to the plan, you bet I'd be all in. I don't have romantic feelings for him, but I know he is a kinky guy, so I could figure myself out for that lol. My neighbor and I made this pact walking home from the bus stop in 3rd or 4th grade. If we were still unmarried by 30, we'd get married to each other. I emphasize unmarried because we have both been in serious relationships for 4+ years in our late 20s, but I wasn't giving him any other loopholes. He turned 29 in December 2018 and I turned 29k in January 2019. I dumped my long-term loser boyfriend. He proposed to his amazing and beautiful long-term girlfriend. Should not have put all my eggs in that basket. JK, there was only like 0.5% of me that thought it would really happen between my neighbor and me. It was just time to move on from my ex and definitely time for my neighbor friend to put a ring on his GF's finger. Had one, and when I said it I meant it. We've known each other since we were kids. Kind of an on-off FWB. Well, I lost interest when it was clear she wasn't over her ex. And when we did hook up again it just wasn't the same. It almost felt as if both of us were just settling and it didn't work. A big step backwards from the relationship we had where the idea was kind of an old flame fling type of deal. I had this deal with my best friend from tech school, Air Force. But we were young and stupid and said 27 instead of 40. I got engaged about 6 months before my 27th birthday. But even if I hadn't, I don't think I would have honored it at such a young age. Now that I'm past it, turns out 27 feels too young to think. Aside if it hasn't happened yet, it never will. I made a pact in 6th grade that if I wasn't married by 40 I would legally change my name to Meow Meows. Help me. My friend Danny and I made this pact when we were like 12. We went to camp together for a few summers. Then his mom died and they didn't come back after that. But we were pen pals for years. Real old fashioned letters in the mail. And eventually email. Until one day, I'd say we were in our 20s. And he said I met someone. And his name is Scott. And now I'm married to a lady, so maybe that's why we got along so well as kids. I just watched the Friends episode today where Chandler says this to Monica. Weird. My now husband and I have been friends since we were about 15. I watched that episode of Friends where they make said pact. So my girlfriends and I went ahead and chose one of our guy friends to settle with if we made it to 40 unmarried. So I chose my very good friend at the time, who even had a serious girlfriend. I knew that even if we weren't in love, that we'd still have a great time together, and that he'd always treat me well. We started dating about 7 years later and have been married for almost 2. Didn't need to wait until 40, but I'm happy we got started early and happy we're actually in love. Long story short, married 15 years with a daughter and it's been everything I could have hoped for and more. Now, granted, we dated in college and broke up over something stupid. Then for the next decade we were never both single at the same time for long. and things didn't time out well when we were both unattached. We never explicitly said it'd be marriage if we were both single at 40, but that's because neither of us believed in the institution for long. And I guess it doesn't entirely count because at 35 I just woke up one morning, 2.5 years into an otherwise successful relationship, and said, nope, this is bullet, I'm with the wrong person. And without even consulting my future wife I broke it off with a present girlfriend, called future wife, and was like, look, I know what I want and it's you. So maybe my case doesn't qualify because we actually happen to be in love without admitting it. I made an agreement like this. We live in different states, and I'd moved cities since we knew each other during my college days. He found my mom's number, and she passed his message on to me. I knew that's why he was calling. I was married and pregnant when I got the message and never called back, but I think of him all the time. I had a pact with a firecracker of a woman friend. We had actually slept together 3 times. 7 years apart, late teens, mid-late 20s, early 30s, just sort of FWBs one-offs every so often. At some point we made the single at 40, let's get married pact. I got married at 39. She got married the following year. I got divorced 8 years later. Her marriage is still on, but I'm pretty sure it's no barn-burning avatar of awesomeness. So, we both might have been better off sticking with the plan. If she ends up single, definitely look her up. I'm getting close to 40 and have come to terms with being single to my last breath. Not for a lack of trying, but the last one took a lot out of me and the idea of starting over with someone new is just terrifying. I'll date but ultimately end up just adopting a bunch of dogs and living out my days with the undying love of those doggos. I have to say, being nearly 42 myself, these pacts make no sense to me. In this day and age, 40 feels really early to be throwing in the towel. I feel like my life just gets better as I get older. I'm smarter, have some life experience, and I'm more financially secure. For me, now is the perfect time to properly start thinking about a long-term partner. My 8th grade English teacher actually, her and her husband were roommates and said if they were both single by 35 they'd get married. Well, they got married, had 2 kids, and they're still together about 8 years and counting as far as I know. I have a pact like this with my online best friend, but while I'm an introvert with social anxiety, she is a beautiful Latina with no trouble finding girls to date, so it probably won't happen. It's probably just a joke to her, but I would definitely do it. We had a pact that we would meet at the top of the Eiffel Tower. My dang heart got involved and I married her at 24, but I still took her to Paris when the time came. I made a pact with my childhood best friend when we were young teens to get married if we were both still single at 30. Ended up getting together almost 4 years ago in our mid-20s, haha. We've brought up the pact before and decided it still stands. Friends since we were 15. If neither of us are married when we're 28, we got engaged when he turned 28, 6 months before I did. We had just gotten done with a nighttime geocache. It was like 3 AM and our friend was in the car with us. He was driving. I was in the back seat. Friend was sitting shotgun. He mentioned the agreement. I literally said, I mean, your birthday is tomorrow. Why not? So we bought rings and announced it to family and friends. It did not go well. Neither the announcement, nor the engagement itself. I moved out and broke off the engagement within 4 months. We were meant to be best friends. We were not meant to cohabitate. He didn't even seem to care when I sat him down to talk about it. Wouldn't even turn off Thor. Lol. His parents were devastated. Mine were relieved. He and I went right back to being friends as though nothing happened. I have a pact with someone that if we're both single when we turn 40, we'll kill each other in a car collision. Does that count? While studying abroad in Europe, I went on vacation with a girl to the Canary Islands. We were 20-21. I turn 35 next month. We made a pact that we would come back onto the island in 20 years. The truth is, it's just stupid, meaningless nonsense that naive young people say to each other. Sure, I suppose there's a world where we both end up single and in a place where that pact interests us. but it's 1,000,000 to 1. I'm happily married with 2 kids, she's married as well. We haven't even had a conversation in about a decade. In a scenario where something like this works out, it's just a sentimental cherry on top, not a catalyst. This is the best question. I didn't know I needed these answers, but I'm so thankful for OP right now. Me and my GF of 3 years made a pact like that 4 years ago. We're now both 24. Guess neither of us will be single by 30 to marry each other, so I dodged her bullet. I had such an agreement with an old high school friend of mine that if we hadn't married anyone by the age of 30, we'd marry each other. Well, we found ourselves single in our mid-late 20s and ended up hooking up and sleeping together a few times. It was really nice, but that was it. I think we knew we weren't right for each other after all, but we tested the waters a bit, physically, and had fun. We still joke about it from time to time. I had such a pact with my best guy friend growing up. It was for 30, and he was married by then. Bonus. We remained very close friends until he died this past year. Extra bonus. His wife became my best friend and has been for over 20 years. I made that pact with a friend for 30. We're now 31 and married to each other for 3 years. We didn't end up needing the pact. I definitely had one of these. It was supposed to be when we were 30. I turned 30 in a few months. The problem is I forget who I made the pact with. She is probably in a relationship now, whoever she is. Life hack for anyone who says kids aren't much of an option at 40. Don't try to pump out more kids and just adopt. I had this pact with my closest friend, girl. We said we'd do it by 35. Met my wife at 32. One of my wife's cousins was a great guy and we introduced him to my friend one night. They actually knew of each other as both were in finance. They fell in love and married a few years later. We always joke that I fulfilled my obligations and we're all closer friends now. I made this type of pact with another guy. We promised that if we were both single at 40 we would buy a house together and turn it into the ultimate bachelor pad bro castle. Maybe we would even get a civil union for the tax benefits and then hook each other up with as many women as possible. He's married and I'm in an extremely serious 3-year relationship, so the bro castle won't be built anytime soon. A lot of comments saying they chose age 30, but man, I think that's still so young. Not me, but my friends I work with. They knew each other in high school, were romantic but mostly friendly, and made this pact somewhat sarcastically. 20 years later in their 40s, their high school friend group had a large rendezvous here on the lake where we live, and long story short, she never went back home to where she came from. I think they have a very average relationship though. They're not rainbows and butterflies, but are satisfied and working as a team. I guess that's exactly how realistic and pragmatic a deal like that is. Last resort type of thing. It's working though, so good for them. I did it once with my best friend when we were 15, but some years later he told me he was gay, so I don't think that's going to happen. Actually, she wanted a hey child,